Hey guys, this is Miss Arlequin, and in this video, we're going to be talking about temporal shifts. So a temporal shift is basically a time change. So in literature, it happens when the story is suddenly moving to a different time or time period. So usually you're going to see some kind of a signal word. It's going to be something time related or sequence related, like when I was 5. That clearly, if it's the story was being written by an adult up until this point, when it says when I was 5, and even just the use of the past tense verb was tells you that it's in the past. A week earlier, obviously earlier means it happened before. At 15 years of age, I found myself. So if you are starting, again, something like a memoir or a story, where the person or character is older, and then all of a sudden they start talking about things from their past, that's usually a sign that a flashback is occurring. And so a flashback is one of the types of temporal shifts, or you could have the opposite, where you move forward in time, and then that would be called a flash forward. All right, so a flashback is an interruption where the writer is going to insert past events. Usually they're going to do that because they want to give some kind of background information or context to the things that are happening in the current narrative. So for example, if you had a character who's being a bully, the writer might have a flashback to what caused that character to become a bully. So it gives you a greater understanding of the character and the things that are happening presently in the story. Now, flashback can be used to build suspense. It can be used to shorten really tedious or too long and boring dialogue that's happening between characters. Usually a good narrative is going to have a mix of dialogue and narration. It can help clarify events in the story. So again, I'm going to refer back to the example of the bully. If you just have somebody who is a villain, who's a horrible bully, having a flashback could actually give a little bit more perspective. If you saw that that bully character actually had some really horrible things that happened to them as a child, it would kind of explain and have you see things from that character's perspective, have you feel a little bit more sympathy or maybe even empathy for that character. It could also, again, give insight and reasoning for character behavior. So just like with the bully, you start to understand why they're doing the things that they're doing. Now, a flashback is not the same as when a character just briefly mentions a memory. So like if I say something like, oh, I remember when I was 5 years old and we went to the park. That was fun. And then I just keep moving forward with the regular timeline. That's not a flashback. That's just a brief mention of a memory. A flashback is only when events are described in detail from the past, and the regular narrative is interrupted in order for the flashback to occur. Now, the flashback can be as little as a paragraph, but if that paragraph spends time really focusing on events in the past, almost as if you're time traveling, it's a flashback. Now, the opposite of a flashback is the flash forward. You interrupt the regular chronology of the story in order to tell a future event. And usually, or lots of times, the entire story just moves forward into the future. So in a way, you're actually cutting out a lot of story events. So memoirs are going to use flash forwards a lot because a memoir is not about telling a person's entire life story. It's about skipping around and telling the memories that are the most important. So a flash forward can be used just the same way as a flashback. It can indicate the importance of events that are occurring. A flashback that can explain something and give context to the present. A flash forward can give context to the present by showing something important that's later on going to happen. Or you can see how what's happening now is going to affect the future in a certain way. So it could also be used to reinforce theme. Generally, a flash forward is going to be expected or imagined events in the future, and it's going to be interjected into the main plot. So usually main plot is the present time, just like flashback is going back into the past, flash forward is going into the future from that present plot line. And you would usually, again, only use a flashback or a flash forward if you really needed to reveal important parts of the story that, in the case of a flash forward, haven't happened yet. So Harry Potter is a great example of a flash forward. The end of the series has a flash forward to 20 years in the future, where we get to see Harry, Ron, and Hermione as adults. We get to see their children going to Hogwarts for the first time. Now, just like with a flashback, a flash forward is not a character briefly thinking about their future. Flash forward has to be a more detailed or extended jump into future events. So it wouldn't be a character saying, I wonder what I'll be like as an adult, and then just moving on with their day. It has to be something like, 5 years later, I was walking to class when, and then you continue with the flash forward for at least a few sentences. All right, so that is a brief introduction to temporal shifts, and I hope it helps you clarify some of these techniques in the literature that we are reading.